Time is the only currency you spend without knowing your balance. You spend it on traffic lights. You spend it in grocery lines. You spend it lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wishing you were somewhere else. Arthur Penhilgon was a man who hated spending time. To him, every second not used for making money was a second wasted. He was efficient. He was ambitious. And he was miserable. Arthur stood on the corner of Fifth Avenue, the rain soaking through his expensive Italian suit. He was late. Again, the taxi was stuck in gridlock. The subway was delayed. Come on, Arthur screamed at the red light, ignoring the strange looks from passers-by. Why does everything take so long? He didn't know it yet, but he was about to make a deal that would answer his question in the most terrifying way possible. Arthur ducked into an alleyway he had walked past 1,000 times but never entered. He expected garbage cans and rats. Instead, he found silence. The roar of New York City, the honking, the sirens, the shouting, vanished the moment he crossed the threshold. The only sound was the rhythmic tapping of rain on cobblestones. At the dead end of the alley stood a shop. It looked displaced in time, like a slice of Victorian London dropped into modern Manhattan. The sign above the door swung gently, creaking despite the lack of wind. Kronos and Company, repairs, restorations, and removals. Arthur checked his watch. 8:15 p.m. He was already 15 minutes late for the dinner that would decide his promotion. He needed a phone. His battery was dead. Maybe the shop had a landline. He pushed the heavy oak door open. A bell chimed. Not a sharp electronic beep, but a deep, resonant brass note that seemed to vibrate in his chest. The inside of the shop smelled of old paper, mahogany, and ozone. Clocks covered every inch of the walls. Grandfather clocks, cuckoo clocks, pocket watches, digital alarms. And the ticking, it was deafening. A million mechanical heartbeats ticking out of sync. "We are closed," a voice said from the shadows. Arthur jumped. Behind a high counter sat a man. He was impossibly old, yet his hands, currently dissecting a tiny gold watch, were steady and smooth. He wore a jeweler's loop over one eye. I just need to use a phone," Arthur stammered, dripping water onto the pristine floor. "I'm late. I'm wasting time." The old man looked up. The jeweler's loop magnified his left eye, making it look enormous and searching. "Wasting time," the old man repeated slowly, savoring the words. "A common complaint. You have a lot of it, don't you? Time you don't want. I have too little." Arthur snapped, his stress boiling over. "I spend half my life waiting. Waiting for trains, waiting for meetings, waiting for coffee. If I could just cut out the garbage, I'd be a CEO by now." The clockmaker set down his tools. He smiled, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Cut out the garbage," the clockmaker mused. Interesting choice of words. He reached under the counter and pulled out a sleek, black hourglass. But the sand inside wasn't falling down. It was floating, suspended in the middle, defying gravity. "I am not a phone company, Mr. Penhilgon," the clockmaker said. Arthur hadn't told him his name. "I am an editor." "An editor?" Arthur asked, confused. "For life," the clockmaker clarified. "You treat your life like a rough draft. You want to keep the exciting scenes, the promotions, the parties, the victories, and delete the boring chapters, the waiting, the commute, the rainy Tuesday nights." Arthur stared at him. "Yes, exactly. Who wouldn't? I can offer you a service," the clockmaker said, sliding a piece of parchment across the counter. It looked like a standard contract, but the ink shimmered like blood under moonlight. "I can install a mechanism in your mind. Whenever you are bored, whenever you are waiting, whenever you feel that time is useless, you will skip it." "Skip it?" Arthur frowned. Like sleep? Better, the clockmaker whispered. To the outside world, you will function on autopilot. You will stand in line, you will drive the car. But your consciousness, will blink and be at the good part instantly. You enter the taxi, blink, and you are at the destination. No traffic. No stress. Pure efficiency. Arthur's heart raced. It sounded like a superpower. Imagine never being bored again. Imagine skipping the 4-hour flight and just arriving at the vacation. Imagine skipping the awkward silence in the elevator. And the cost? Arthur asked, suspicious. You want my soul? The clockmaker laughed dryly. Oh, heavens no. Souls are messy. Ideal and a much more valuable commodity. He tapped the hourglass. I keep the time you skip. You don't want it, do you? The boredom? The waiting? It's trash to you. I simply collect the trash. You want my boredom? Arthur blinked. That's it. That is the bargain. You get a life of pure highlights. I get the scraps. The clockmaker held out a fountain pen. Do we have a deal? Arthur looked at his watch. 8:20 p.m. If he signed this, he could skip the anxiety of being late and just eat the dinner. He could skip the apology. He could skip the boring appetizers. It was a no-brainer. Where do I sign? Arthur asked. He signed his name with a flourish. The moment the ink dried, the deafening ticking of the clocks in the room stopped. Complete silence. Gun, the clockmaker said softly. Enjoyed the fast lane, Arthur. Arthur blinked. Flash. Arthur was suddenly holding a fork, biting into a steak. He looked around, disoriented. He wasn't in the dusty shop. He wasn't in the rain. He was in a warm, expensive restaurant. His boss was sitting across from him, laughing at a joke Arthur must have just told. Brilliant, Penhaligon, the boss tuned, raising the glass of wine. That's exactly the kind of efficiency I'm looking for. The promotion is yours. Arthur froze. He looked down at his clothes. He was dry. His suit was crisp. He checked his watch. 9:30 p.m. He had just skipped an hour and 10 minutes. He had skipped the rain, the travel, the apology, and the awkward small talk. He had arrived straight at the victory. A thrill of electric excitement shot through his spine. It worked. It actually worked. Arthur smiled, raising his glass. To efficiency, he said, but deep in the back of his mind, a tiny voice, quiet as a ticking watch, wondered, what exactly did I just do during that hour? The next morning, Arthur woke up with a headache, but it was the good kind, the buzz of potential. He looked at his toothbrush. 2 minutes of standing in front of a mirror, moving his hand back and forth. Boring. Wasteful. Arthur closed his eyes. He thought, skip. Snap. He was dressed. His mouth tasted of mint. His tie was perfectly knotted. He laughed aloud. It was magic. No, it was better than magic. It was efficiency. Arthur stepped out of his apartment building. It was raining again. A line of miserable people waited for the bus. Skip. Snap. He was sitting at his desk. His computer was on. The commute, usually 45 minutes of hell, had vanished into the void. He felt fresh. He felt energized. While his colleagues dragged themselves in, shaking off umbrellas and complaining about the traffic, Arthur was already typing. The morning meeting began at 9 a.m. It was led by Gary from accounting, a man who could turn a fascinating subject into dust. Gary started talking about quarterly budget variance. Arthur felt the familiar itch of boredom. His legs started bouncing. Why am I here? He thought, I just need the summary. He looked at Gary's moving mouth. Skip. Snap. The conference room was empty. Arthur was the only one left sitting at the table. He looked down. His notebook was full of notes. His handwriting. He blinked in shock. I took notes. The clockmaker had said his body would function on autopilot. Apparently, his autopilot was a diligent worker. He read the notes. They were precise, accurate, and highlighted the key action items. Arthur grinned. He had just sat through a 2-hour meeting in 0 seconds, and he had done a better job than when he was actually conscious. The addiction took hold instantly. For the next week, Arthur Penhilgon became a ghost in his own life. He deleted the elevator rides. He deleted the time waiting for the microwave to ding. He deleted the awkward small talk with the receptionist. He deleted the time spent filing reports. To the outside world, Arthur was a machine. He never complained. He never looked tired. He worked 16 hours a day, but to him, it felt like 15 minutes. His boss, Mr. Sterling, called him into the office on Friday. "Arthur," Sterling said, looking impressed, "your output this week is inhuman. You've finished the Henderson account in 2 days. It usually takes a team a week." Arthur smiled. He didn't remember doing the Henderson account. He had skipped the entire tedious process of data entry. "Just staying focused, sir," Arthur said smoothly. "Keep this up," Sterling nodded, "and you'll be running this department by Christmas." Arthur walked out of the office feeling like a god. He had hacked the system. He had won the game. But the cracks were starting to form, hairline fractures in the glass of his reality. That evening, he went home to his wife, Sarah. They had been married for 5 years. The spark hadn't gone out, but it had dimmed. Conversations were often about bills, chores, or Sarah's job at the gallery, which Arthur found incredibly dull. They sat at the dinner table. Sarah was talking about a difficult artist she was managing. And then he said the lighting was too yellow. Can you believe it? "Arthur, are you listening?" Arthur looked at her. He loved her. He really did. But he had had such a fast day. Listening to this story felt like moving through molasses. He just wanted to get to the part where they relaxed on the couch. Just a little skip, he told himself. Just has to complaining. Skip. Snap. Arthur blinked. He was standing in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher. The dinner was over. He looked around. Sarah was gone. He walked into the bedroom. Sarah was already in bed, turned away from him, the lights off. "Sarah," he whispered. "Go to sleep, Arthur," she said. Her voice was cold. Sharp. Arthur froze. What happened? During the dinner, the part he skipped. Had he said something wrong? Did his autopilot nod at the wrong time? Or did he just sit there, eating silently like a robot, ignoring her emotional needs? He climbed into bed, a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. For the first time, he realized the flaw in the clockmaker's bargain. When you skip the boring parts of a conversation, you often skip the connection. Relationships aren't built on the highlights. They are built in the messy, boring, repetitive moments of simply being together. Arthur looked at the back of his wife's head. He wanted to apologize. But apologize for what? He didn't know what he had done. He felt a wave of guilt. But then, the guilt felt heavy. It felt uncomfortable. It felt like waiting. "I don't have to feel this," Arthur thought seductively. "I can just skip to tomorrow morning when she's not mad anymore." It was a dangerous thought. It was the thought of a junkie. Arthur closed his eyes. Skip. Snap. Sunlight hit his face. It was morning. Sarah was gone. Her side of the bed was cold. Arthur sat up, alone in the silence of his efficient, optimized apartment. And for a split second, he didn't know what day it was. The addiction didn't just grow, it evolved. At first, Arthur only skipped the unpleasant moments. Then, he started skipping the neutral moments. Then, He started skipping anything that wasn't a dopamine hit of success. He skipped the flight to Tokyo. Snap. He was shaking hands, signing a merger. He skipped the flight back. Snap. He was in his new penthouse overlooking Central Park. He skipped the flu. Snap. He was healthy again. Arthur didn't live in days anymore. He lived in vignettes. He was editing his life down to a highlight reel of victories, but he forgot the movie made only of explosions has no plot. One evening, or what felt like the next day to Arthur, he came home to find Sarah sitting on the bed, holding the positive pregnancy test. She was crying, tears of joy and fear streaming down her face. "We're going to be parents, Arthur," she sobbed. Arthur felt a surge of panic. Parents. That meant crying, diapers, sleepless nights, doctor's appointments, waiting, so much waiting. He hugged her, but his finger was already hovering over the mental button. "I'll just skip the morning sickness phase," he thought, just a messy part. Snap. He was in a hospital waiting room. A nurse was screaming, "Push!" It was too loud, too stressful. Skip. Snap. A baby was screaming in his arms. It was red, wrinkled, and incredibly loud. It was 3 a.m. Skip. Snap. The baby was crawling. It knocked over a vase. Sarah was yelling at him to help clean up. Skip. Snap. Arthur blinked. He was standing in his home office. The room was silent. He looked down at his hands. They looked different. The skin was drier. There were sunspots on his knuckles that hadn't been there yesterday. He walked to the window. The skyline of New York had changed. A new skyscraper that was under construction last week was now fully finished and gleaming in the sun. A cold dread settled in his stomach. "Computer," Arthur said, his voice sounding deeper, raspy. "What is the date?" The robotic voice replied, "Today is October 14th, 2029. Arthur grabbed the edge of the desk. 2029? He had signed the contract in 2024. 5 years. He had skipped 5 years. To him, it felt like maybe a month. He ran to the bathroom mirror. The man staring back was a stranger. His hair, once thick and brown, was now thinning and streaked with iron gray. Deep lines were etched around his mouth. Not smile lines, but frown lines. The lines of a man who is constantly focused, constantly working, constantly efficient. His eyes looked empty, haunted. "Danny?" A small voice came from the doorway. Arthur spun around. Standing there was a little girl. She was about 4 years old, holding a stuffed rabbit by the ear. She had Sarah's eyes, but Arthur's chin. Arthur fell to his knees. This was his daughter. He remembered the pregnancy test. He remembered the red, screaming infant for a split second. But he didn't remember her. He didn't remember her first step. He didn't remember her first word. He didn't remember naming her. "Hey," Arthur whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. "Hey, sweetie, what's your name?" The little girl recoiled. She took a step back, hiding behind the door frame. She looked at him with fear. "Mommy," she yelled. "The stranger is home." The stranger. The word hit Arthur harder than a physical blow. Sarah walked into the room. She looked different too. She was thinner, harder. Her eyes were tired. She didn't look at Arthur with love. She looked at him with the weary tolerance one has for a difficult roommate. "She's scared of you, Arthur," Sarah said coldly, picking up the girl. "Don't force it." "I'm her father," Arthur stammered. "Why did she call me a stranger?" "Because you're never here," Sarah snapped. "Oh, your body is here. You eat dinner with us. You drive us to school. But your eyes, they're dead. You stare through us. You're always checked out. You're like a robot, Arthur. You only Wake up when you get a bonus or buy a new car. Sarah turned to leave. Wait, Arthur pleaded. I've been working hard. Look at this house. Look at what I provided. You provided money, Sarah said, not turning back. You didn't provide a father. Lily asked me yesterday why Daddy looks at her like he doesn't know who she is. She slammed the door. Arthur stood alone in the hallway of his multi-million-dollar penthouse. He was the CEO of his firm. He was rich. He was successful. He had skipped every boring moment, every argument, every second of waiting. He had achieved pure efficiency, and in doing so, he had become a ghost in his own family's life. He looked at the closed door. He could hear Sarah reading a story to Lily inside. Once upon a time, Arthur wanted to go in. He wanted to listen, but the door was closed. And standing there, listening to the muffled voice, feeling the shame wash over him, it was painful. It was boring. It was sad. His mind, trained like a rat in a maze, immediately offered the solution. It hurts. Skip it. You can't fix it tonight anyway. Skip to the morning. Skip to when she forgives you. Arthur gripped his head, his fingernails digging into his scalp. No, he gritted out. No. Stay in the pain. But the mechanism the clockmaker installed was slippery. It reacted to his subconscious desire, not just his conscious will. The moment the pain became too much to bear, snap. Arthur was sitting in his office. It was night. He looked at the calendar. It was 3 months later. He had skipped the apology. He had skipped the attempt to fix it. And on his desk, there was a letter. Legal papers. Petition for divorce. The divorce papers were still sitting on his desk, unsigned, when the phone rang. It was the hospital. His mother. A stroke. Arthur rushed to St. Jude's Medical Center. He didn't skip the drive. The fear was too sharp, too immediate to skip. He arrived to find his mother in the ICU, hooked up to a constellation of machines. She was small, frail, and asleep. The doctor said the next 24 hours were critical. She might wake up, the doctor said, or she might not. We just have to wait. Wait. That word. That cursed word. Arthur sat in the plastic chair beside her bed. Beep, beep, beep. The heart monitor was a metronome of torture. 10 minutes passed. 20 minutes. Nothing happened. Just the beeping. Just the smell of antiseptic and old age. Arthur shifted in his chair. His back hurt. He looked at his phone. No signal. He looked at his mother. She hadn't moved. The familiar itch started at the base of his skull. The boredom reflex. This is useless, his efficiency-obsessed brain whispered. You can't do anything. You're just sitting here staring at a sleeping woman. It's inefficient. No, Arthur whispered, gripping the bed rail. I have to be here. If she wakes up, I need to be here. He tried to focus. He tried to hold onto the moment. But the pain of seeing her like this, weak, dying, was not just boring. It was agonizing. It was a dull, heavy ache in his chest. The clockmaker's bargain wasn't just about skipping boredom anymore. It was about skipping discomfort. And grief is the most uncomfortable feeling of all. Just skipping an hour, the voice seduced him. Just until the doctor comes back. Skip the waiting. Wake up when there is news. Arthur looked at the clock. 2:15 p.m. He looked at his mother's chest rising and falling. I can't take this, he thought. I can't take the silence. He closed his eyes, tears squeezing out. Skip. Snap. Arthur opened his eyes. He was standing up, but he wasn't in the hospital room. He felt wind. Cold, wet wind. He looked down. He was wearing a black suit. He was holding the black umbrella. He looked up. He was standing on grass. Wet, muddy grass. In front of him was a hole in the ground. A coffin was being lowered into it. Arthur's blood turned to ice. "No," he gasped. "No, no, no." He looked around wildly. A priest was reading a prayer. A few distant relatives were crying. Arthur grabbed the arm of the woman standing next to him, his Aunt Marie. "Marie!" Arthur shouted, his voice cracking. "What happened? Where is the hospital?" Aunt Marie looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. She pulled her arm away. "Keep it together, Arthur," she hissed. "It's the funeral. Don't make a scene now. You were barely there when she was alive. At least be respectful now." The funeral. Arthur staggered back. He checked his watch. Friday. He had entered the hospital on Tuesday. He hadn't just skipped an hour. He had skipped the death. He had skipped the moment she woke up and asked for him. He had skipped her taking her last breath. He had skipped the arrangements, the obituary, the wake, the drive to the cemetery. His autopilot had done it all. His autopilot had nodded at the doctors, signed the death certificate, picked up the casket, and driven him here. Arthur fell to his knees in the mud. "Mom!" He screamed at the coffin. "I'm here. I'm here now." But he wasn't there. He was 3 days late. He had traded the pain of waiting for a lifetime of regret. He had saved himself 3 days of sadness, and in exchange, he had lost the only person who ever loved him unconditionally. The rain poured down, mixing with his tears. But this time, he couldn't skip the rain. The mechanism was jammed by the sheer magnitude of his horror. He was forced to feel every cold drop. After the funeral, Arthur went home. Or rather, he went to the place where he stored his body. It wasn't a home anymore. Sarah had moved out months ago. She took Lily. His mother was in the ground. His friends, if he ever had any, had stopped calling years ago because Otto Arthur was a boring workaholic who never wanted to hang out. Arthur sat in his expensive leather chair, staring at the reflection of his own hollow face in the window. He was 45 years old, but in his memory, he was 28. He had lived less than a decade of experiences, while his body had aged nearly 2. He looked at his bank account on his phone. $12,400,000. He was rich. He had won the game of capitalism. He was the most efficient man in New York, and he would give every single cent of it to be back in that hospital room, bored, uncomfortable, with his mother breathing beside him. "I want it back," Arthur whispered to the empty room. He stood up and threw his glass of scotch against the wall. It shattered. "I want it back," he screamed. He started pacing. He tried to remember the last time he felt happy. Truly happy. Not the dopamine hit of a promotion, not the satisfaction of a finished task, but the slow, warm, inefficient happiness of a Sunday morning with nothing to do. He couldn't remember. He had skipped all of them. He realized then that the boring parts of life were not the trash. They were the clue. The waiting in line is where you notice the girl smiling at you. The stuck traffic is where you listen to music and think. The sleepless nights with a baby are where the bond is forged. Life is the waiting. The events are just a punctuation. Arthur had a book full of exclamation marks and no words. He grabbed his coat. He didn't check his watch. He didn't care what time it was. He ran out the door. He didn't take the elevator. It was too fast. He ran down 40 flights of stairs. He needed to feel his legs burn. He needed to feel his heart pounding. He needed to feel something. He ran into the rainy streets of New York. He didn't hail a taxi. He sprinted. He ran past a confusion of Times Square. He ran through the dark alleys. He was looking for a specific alley, an alley that shouldn't exist. He had to find the Clockmaker. He had to break the bargain. Arthur found the door. He didn't knock. He hammered it with his fists until the wood splintered. "Open up." He screamed. "I know you're in there." The door creaked open. The bell didn't chime this time. It let out a dull, crack thud. Arthur stumbled inside. The shop was different. The mahogany was rotting. The clocks on the wall were covered in thick spider webs. And the ticking, it wasn't a rhythmic heartbeat anymore. It was chaotic, fast, out of sync. Tick, 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 tick. The clockmaker sat behind the counter. He looked ancient, his skin like parchment paper stretched over a skull. He was arranging piles of gray dust into neat lines. "You look terrible, Mr. Penheligon," the clockmaker croaked, not looking up. "You stole it," Arthur gasped, leaning against the counter, dripping with rain and sweat. "You stole my life." "I stole nothing," the clockmaker replied calmly. "I provided a service. You asked to skip the boring parts. I merely collected the trimmings." "I missed my mother's death," Arthur roared. "I missed my daughter growing up. I lost my wife. I have millions of dollars and I am the poorest man on earth. Take it back. Undo it." The clockmaker finally looked up. His magnified eye looked sad, almost pitying. "Undo it? Arthur, look at the hourglass." Arthur looked. The sleek black hourglass from years ago was sitting on the counter. The top bulb was completely empty. All the sand, Arthur's wasted time, was in the bottom bulb. "It is spent," the clockmaker said. "Time is not a videotape. You cannot rewind. Entropy only moves in one direction." "There must be a way," Arthur pleaded, falling to his knees. "I'll give you everything. The money, the penthouse, the company. Take it all. Money?" The clockmaker laughed, a sound like dry leaves crinkling. "I have no use for money. I deal in time." The clockmaker leaned over the counter, his face shadowed. "There is one way to regain the memories you skipped. To feel them, to live them. But the cost is steep." "Name it," Arthur said without hesitation. "Equivalent exchange," the clockmaker whispered. "To buy back the past, you must pay with the future." Arthur froze. "What do you mean?" "I can give you back the moments you've lost. I can put you back in that hospital room. I can put you back at the dinner table. But you'll have to pay for that time using the time you have left." The clockmaker pulled out a new, terrifyingly small hourglass. "The exchange rate is not 1-to-1, Arthur. The past is expensive. To reclaim 1 hour of lost memory, it will cost you 1 year of your remaining life." Arthur stared at him. 1 year and for 1 hour? "Yes," the clockmaker said. "You are 45. You likely have 40 years left. You can trade those 40 years to get back, perhaps 2 days of the memories you skipped." It was a suicide pact. It was madness to trade decades of life just to sit in a hospital room, just to endure a boring dinner. Arthur thought about his empty penthouse. He thought about the cold, efficient future awaiting him. 40 years of being rich and alone. 40 years of skipping to the end. Then he thought of his mother's hand. He thought of Lily's voice. He realized he didn't want a long life. He wanted a real one. Arthur stood up. He wiped the tears from his face. "Where do I sign?" Arthur signed. And the world dissolved. Flash. He wasn't in the shop. He was back in the hospital. The smell of antiseptic hit him like perfume. The annoying beep, beep of the monitor sounded like a symphony. He looked down. He was holding his mother's hand. It was warm. She was breathing. Arthur didn't skip. He didn't check his watch. He squeezed her hand. "I'm here, Mom," he whispered. "I'm right here. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." He sat there for 3 hours. He watched the dust motes dance in the light. He wiped her brow. He listened to her ragged breathing. It was boring. It was painful. It was slow. And it was the most beautiful moment of his life. He felt his life force draining away, years of his future burning up like fuel to keep this moment alive. But he didn't care. He was present. Flash. He was at the dinner table. Sarah was complaining about the artist. Arthur didn't tune her out. He leaned in. He looked at the way her nose crinkled when she was annoyed. He listened to the cadence of her voice. "You're right," Arthur said, interrupting her. "That artist sounds like a nightmare. Tell me more." Sarah looked surprised, then she smiled. A real, genuine smile. Arthur felt another 5 years of his life burn away. His back ached. His hands trembled. But he held her gaze. He bought that connection with his lifeblood. Flash. He was in the nursery. It was 3 a.m. The baby was screaming. Arthur picked her up. He rocked her. He smelled the milk and the baby powder. "Shh, shh," he hummed. "Daddy's got you." He walked around the room for hours until his legs felt like lead. He was an old man now, holding a new life. He felt his heart stutter. He was running out of currency. Flash. Arthur opened his eyes. He was back in the present day. He was sitting on a wooden bench at a bus stop in Queens. It was raining. Arthur looked down at his hands. They were spotted with liver spots, shaking uncontrollably. He touched his face. His skin was like crinkled paper. He looked at his reflection in a puddle. He was 90 years old. He had traded 40 years of future for 40 hours of the past. He had nothing left. The tank was empty. A bus pulled up. The driver opened the door. "You getting on, Pops?" The driver asked impatiently. "I got a schedule to keep." Arthur looked at the bus. It was warm inside. It was going somewhere. Then he looked at the rain falling on the pavement. He looked at a stray cat hiding under a dumpster. He looked at the gray clouds swirling above. "No," Arthur wheezed, his voice thin as a reed. I think I'll just wait." "Suit yourself," the driver grunted. The doors hissed shut. The bus drove away. Arthur sat alone on the bench. He was cold. He was wet. He was dying. And he was perfectly, completely happy. He closed his eyes and listened to the rain. Tap, tap, tap. He didn't want to be anywhere else. He didn't want to be anyone else. He wasn't waiting for the bus. He wasn't waiting for death. He was just waiting. For the first time in his life, Arthur Penhilgon wasn't rushing. He took a deep breath. He tasted the ozone. He smiled. And in the silence between two raindrops, Arthur's watch stopped ticking.